Hi everyone, today I'm going to talk about IBD. Tuesday the 19th of May is IBD Awareness Day. Some of you may not know anything about IBD, or some of you may know a little and want to know a little bit more. This is why I'm doing this video, so that there's more information out there about IBD, and particularly from a personal point of view, what it's like to live with such a condition. I'm actually a little bit nervous about putting this video out there. Not many people actually know this about me, but I have ulcerative colitis, which is a form of IBD. There's only really my close friends and family and my work colleagues who know this about me. So yeah, it's quite scary putting it out into the world like this, but I think it's really important that people should know more about it. I do have a couple of disclaimers just before I start. Sorry, if I keep looking over there, it's because I've got a lot of notes because I want to make sure that I don't miss anything out, and I will apologise right now just in case there's anything I do miss out, and anyone out there who's got IBD thinks, why didn't she include that? I'm really sorry in advance. There is a lot to discuss, especially for those who don't know anything about IBD. There's a lot of information that needs to be put out there so that you guys understand about it. So I am sorry if I miss anything, and I will try my best to cover everything that you think needs to be covered. So my first disclaimer is I am not filming this for sympathy. The people who know that I have this know that it's just something that I've got to deal with, and I'm fine with that. It's just the way it is. Another disclaimer, there is no miracle cure for IBD. I don't want anybody to post comments saying, have you tried changing your diet? Have you thought about this alternative method? All of those things, none of them are really going to work. There is no cure. It is something that is a chronic illness, so you're going to live with it probably for the rest of your life. There are certain things that can be changed to help it, but it's only on a personal level. You can't say across the board that eating chocolate, for example, is going to help or not help. You can't say that. So please don't try and tell me any miracle cures. I know the situation. I go to a gastroenterologist who tells me exactly what I need to do. I've been to a dietitian who has told me other things as well. So it's all very personal, and it is all on a kind of case-by-case basis. So there is no miracle cure. Please do not try and convince me that there is. Another disclaimer is talking about this, some people might find this a little bit uncomfortable to listen to. The thing with IBD is that it does affect the bowel, which means that I will probably be talking about some kind of toilet habits throughout this video. And the thing is that toilet habits, it is the biggest taboo. Nobody talks about it, and strangely, I don't know why nobody talks about it, because everybody does it. And the thing with IBD is that it's very natural to feel quite embarrassed by the condition and not want to discuss it with anybody, which shouldn't be the case. There should be no embarrassment, but I think an important part of this IBD awareness is to get people actually talking about these things, and I think you don't need to be embarrassed. I've written a lot of notes about things that I want to talk about in this video, so it's going to be quite lengthy, but I would really, really appreciate if you all stayed right till the end and heard everything that I've got to say. So I've used it a couple of times throughout this video already, but the first things first, what is IBD? IBD stands for inflammatory bowel disease. There are a number of different types of inflammatory bowel diseases, and the main ones are Crohn's disease and ulcerative colitis. They are both chronic diseases, which means that they are for a very long term and usually lifelong, and they are inflammation of the gut, so that's kind of your intestines. There is no cure, but medication can help to relieve some of the symptoms. Probably the most important thing to bring up here is that it is an invisible illness, which means that it could be quite hard for people to understand what's actually wrong with you. It can be a little bit frustrating at times. Both of them are usually diagnosed from kind of the age of late teens to early 20s, and that is certainly the case for me. Saying that, it can appear at any age. Nobody actually knows what the causes are of IBD. There's been a lot of research into IBD, and there are some potential explanations of how people get it. One of the ones is genetics. So perhaps if there is somebody in your family who has it, it is more likely that you could get it too. Not to say that everybody out there is going to end up with it because somebody in their family does, but in my personal case, our family has always had a bit of a weakness in the stomach, and my brother actually has Crohn's disease. I'll get more onto my personal story later. Another explanation, it could be the immune system is disrupted. So it could be some kind of illness that you might have had, or perhaps a course of antibiotics or anything like that that could send the immune system into overdrive. So essentially what starts to happen is your immune system attacks perfectly healthy cells, which then obviously results in something inflamed or something wrong. This could also be an explanation for my personal situation, and that is something that I will be mentioning further on in this video. Now I'm going to kind of do a broad overview of the symptoms of IBD, but I will then kind of segment off saying what's different about Crohn's and what's different about colitis. I'm sorry about any of the other IBDs that are out there, but I don't really know much about those, so I was just going to focus on the main two just to get people talking about it. So the main similarity is that they are both an inflammation of the gut. This usually kind of starts off symptoms that can be abdominal pain, it can be recurring or bloody diarrhea, weight loss and extreme fatigue. These are all things that are similar with all IBDs, but that is generally where the similarities will end. I'm going to start talking about Crohn's because this is arguably the more well-known disease. There's been a lot more talk about this in the media recently with people like Sam Fairs from Towie. There's also Dynamo and Cary Grant, the music lady. They've all got Crohn's and they've all been quite vocal about it. The thing with Crohn's is that while it is an inflammation of the gut, it can also affect anywhere from right up from the throat down to the very end. So you can end up with inflammation of the throat, you can end up with inflammation on the stomach, it can be any part of your digestive system. So Crohn's affects more parts of the body. Typically, Crohn's disease has more pain symptoms, so there's more abdominal pains, there's more swelling, there's more joint pain, it can have vomiting, it can be all of these kind of things. Colitis, as you can probably guess from the word colitis, this affects only the colon and also known as the large intestine. Colitis is more a case of finding blood or mucus when you go to the toilet, and you've also got the urgency to need the toilet as well. So there's a couple of statistics that I wanted to share with you. I do apologise, I'm going to keep looking at my screen because I don't want to get any of this wrong. So an estimated 20% of ulcerative colitis sufferers will end up with a stoma bag. So I imagine quite a lot of people will have seen this, especially in the media recently. There's been quite a lot about it. But this is where you have a bag kind of attached to your stomach, which in a way acts as a colon. This is only really there if somebody's had part of that digestive system removed, and it kind of acts as a waste bag in a way. So that's quite a high percentage of sufferers who will end up with that. A whopping 60 to 70% of Crohn's sufferers will end up needing surgery as well. Both of them can be equally serious. Some people have it mild, like I do. I'm very, very lucky. Whereas others will have it quite seriously and they will need surgery, stoma bags, and people have also died from both conditions. Physical effects are only really shown through the medication that's been used. So for example, steroids are often used as a form of medication for Crohn's or colitis. And this can often result in a drastic weight change. So people can bloat up from the use of steroids, but then they can drop weight very, very quickly. Now, before I start talking about my personal situation, I wanted to clear up a couple of discrepancies. A lot of people confuse IBD with IBS. I know when I first started to tell people that I had an IBD, they instantly said, oh, my brother's got IBS. And it's not necessarily the same thing. There are a lot of similarities, but they are quite different. So while IBD is inflammatory bowel disease, IBS is irritable bowel syndrome. Now this can either be a case of an overactive bowel, so needing to run to the toilet very often, and when you've got a nervous stomach usually it happens more. It can also be lazy bowels, which means that you're not going as often as you should be. I know a couple of people with IBS and I know how much it can take over somebody's life, and in that way it is very similar to IBD alongside some of the symptoms that are similar too. But IBD is the one that can result in a very serious condition. It can result in surgery and it can just get worse from there. So IBD is generally more serious. However, I am very aware that IBS takes over your life in a very similar way. So they're both horrible things to have to live with. Like IBD, IBS is hugely affected by stress and anxiety. So in that respect, it's quite difficult to tell them apart. It's for that reason that many people with IBD are actually misdiagnosed to have IBS to start with. IBD can actually be easier to diagnose than IBS can be. They do have very similar symptoms, but to find out if you have IBD, you generally get put in to have a colonoscopy. That's generally using a camera to inspect the colon, and that's a way of them to find out if you have an IBD. So the way that they'd be able to tell is if you have ulcerative colitis, then it's likely that you have mucus or blood on the lining of the colon, whereas if you have Crohn's, it can be quite rough around the edges of the colon and it can also be narrower. So IBS occurs in 10 to 20% of the population across the UK, which is quite a shocking number. So that is a lot of people. That is 1 in 10. 1 to 2 in 10 people have IBS. However, with IBD, 1 in 250 people in the UK suffer from IBD. So that's around 120,000 people have ulcerative colitis, while 90,000 have Crohn's disease. Okay, now my story. I have to apologise, I'm getting a little bit breathless. I think I'm quite nervous about doing this. So I was diagnosed with ulcerative colitis last year in 2014. The story goes, and I don't know whether it's relevant or not, but this is the story. In 2013, I had quite bad acne, and I'd been trying a lot of different medications for quite a long time, and I was finally referred to a dermatologist. They put me on a course of Roaccutane. Now, I don't know if you will have heard of Roaccutane, but it's quite a severe drug. It is banned in America, but we still have it available here in the UK. And it's essentially an overdose of vitamin A, which means that your skin starts to peel and you're getting very, very, very dried out. I was on it for 3 months and I started to notice that I had blood in my stools. Now, I spoke to a friend who also went on Roaccutane, and it was my understanding that it's quite common. When I was on Roaccutane, I got a lot of nosebleeds, and that's because my nose was dried out. So I thought it could be something very similar to that, but I thought it was best to talk to my dermatologist. Now, one of the first things she said to me was, "Do you have a history of IBD in your family?" And I said, "My brother has Crohn's." And she said instantly, "You have to stop taking Roaccutane now." I was really upset that it was stopped after 3 months because I was worried that the spots would just come back instantly. Thankfully, touch wood, that's not the case here so far. So I came off Roaccutane probably August 2013, and it was probably a couple of months after that that I realised that nothing had really changed. I was still having blood when I went to the toilet, and it started to really panic me. But in January 2014, I went to my doctor, had a very embarrassing appointment, but I asked to see a female doctor, so that was a little bit better. But she instantly referred me to a gastroenterologist. Now, I don't know how quickly these referrals usually happen, but I think the case that my brother has Crohn's meant that I was kind of fast-tracked. So I went to see the gastroenterologist almost instantly, about a week later, and I remember seeing actually on his notes, just from me talking to him, that he'd put possible IBD ? Now, at the time, I didn't know what an IBD was, so I did what most people do and thought, oh, does he mean IBS? And after I'd seen that, I obviously looked it up and I thought, oh wow, it's similar to Crohn's. And that was quite shocking for me because I'd spoken to my brother before about the symptoms that I'd had, and he didn't have anything similar, so I'd kind of ruled out that it was an IBD at all. I was booked in to have a colonoscopy probably about a month later. So the deal with getting a colonoscopy is that the day before you have to take some laxatives to clear out the system, and I therefore didn't get any sleep at all the night before, which is probably a big part of why I had such an issue afterwards, which I'll talk about in a moment. You can't eat anything probably, I think it was something like 8 hours before or the night before. It has to be the last thing you eat. You're given quite a strict diet of what you can eat, which is surprising, because there's things like you can have white bread but you can't have brown bread, you can have just a cake, you can have jelly, but you can't have anything that's red in colour, so I couldn't have strawberry jelly, and you can't have anything that's going to be difficult to digest. Similarly, you can't have anything that's too easy to digest with a lot of fibre, so it was quite strict. So I did that, and then I went in for the colonoscopy. I was freaking out beforehand and a bit silly, but I was scared about getting a needle put in my hand. Now, I've got a bit of fear of needles, so I was quite scared about just that. And before I went in, they were really wonderful, but the gastroenterologist came to speak to me just before I went in, and he said, "What is it that you're nervous about?" I said, "I'm nervous about the needle," and he went, "Really?" Should have really known then, but basically, unfortunately, I remember everything, and I often actually kind of get flashbacks of the colonoscopy itself, which is not nice. However, I will say that everybody is different. He was saying to me before I went in that some people don't feel anything when they're getting it done. Some people do feel a lot of pain, and unfortunately I was one of those people. So the good part is it is all over in about 20 minutes, and I was told straight away what was wrong. Here's your pills, off you go. Afterwards, he came and spoke to me, and he told me straight away, "You've got ulcerative colitis," although he actually said I've got proctitis. Proctitis is actually probably the mildest form, and it only affects a very small part of the colon, so I am quite lucky in that respect. But at that point I was so relieved to actually get an answer. Somebody could say unequivocally, "This is what's wrong," and I had pills and I was done. I was out of there, and yeah. So I did find out very quickly, and it is the best way to find out. My real problem was actually the week following. I had a real crash, and I think it may have been because of I'm not getting any sleep the night before, or it could have been just the stress of it all, but I couldn't get out of bed. I was extremely tired. All of my limbs ached. It was horrible. It was like having flu without everything in your head, but just I've never felt fatigue like it. And so that is one of the symptoms of IBD. And it just became apparent to me the week after I was diagnosed. So I had about a week off work because I was so unwell. When I was first diagnosed, I was given a pill called Azocol, and I was told to take 3 in the morning and 3 in the evening, so 6 pills a day. And that was, I think that was 400 milligrams, but it was quite a low dose. Basically, I didn't see any improvement. And so I ended up going back to the gastro, and he bumped up my pills to 800 milligrams, which is really big. I've never really been very good at taking pills, but now I have to. They are really quite sizable, and I'm still taking 6 a day. I have also tried a lot of other things. I've tried suppositories and I've tried enemas as well. At the moment I have a steroid enema that I can take whenever I have a particular flare, which seem to be working quite well, so touch wood, this is working now. Just after I was diagnosed, I was scared. I didn't know anything about it. I didn't know what to expect. I was thinking about my future. I was thinking, I want to have children. How much is that going to affect me? In terms of giving birth, is that going to be a real problem? How's my body going to cope? Am I going to pass it on to my child? I had all of these things to think about, and I went in for my next gastro appointment afterwards with a book full of questions. I had my mum there who was taking notes, which I was really grateful for. Most people who go to the doctor, if you're like me, I will go in, ask a question, and I've forgotten the answer, so it was really useful having my mum there. But he has put my mind at ease by saying I am still considered a mild case. So he actually said to me that my situation is not necessarily lifelong. However, I suppose that depends on what happens coming up. Hopefully what I'm taking now is good enough to actually get rid of it completely, but one can only hope. I don't really have things that are debilitating. I don't have things that necessarily stop me from doing many things. However, there are things such as if I feel just a little bit stressed or a little bit worried about something, then it will instantly show. I will have to rush to the loo, and I often go a lot more often than other people do. The only way I can explain that is kind of, if ever you've had food poisoning or a stomach bug, that kind of wave comes over you where you have to go right now. There's no two ways about it. So I do get that occasionally. My main symptom was always blood in the stool, and I do still occasionally have that. That is something that we're hoping that the medication I take will be able to stop entirely, in which case everything is fine, but at the moment it's okay. But again, it depends on what's going on in your life at the time. I've had a very stressful couple of months in terms of jobs, so it has been bad, but I think now I'm a little bit calmer. It's actually made a real difference. Sometimes I get mild anemia, which means that you are low on iron, and I think that's very common because you are losing quite a lot of blood if you have ulcerative colitis, so it is quite common. And that can result in me being very pale, and generally anemia means that you're very tired and you don't have much energy. I will admit that sometimes I do have moments where I think life is unfair. Why does this happen to me? Why do I have to be so careful about what I eat? Why do I have to drop weight so easily? Everybody has that. I'm only human. It's normal to feel a bit sorry for yourself when going through something like this. But I am so aware of how lucky I am compared to other people. I know how serious these conditions can be, and I've seen firsthand the things that you have to go through. My brother particularly had surgery for his, so I'm very aware of how serious it can get and how lucky I am. With food, there are certain foods that I can't eat. So, for example, as much as I hate to say it, I can no longer eat Chinese meals. I used to love having a Chinese takeaway or going out for Chinese with my family. I don't know if it's something they cook their food in, but I can't eat it. There are things like tomatoes, and strawberries, unfortunately, which are very acidic, and the pips can cause a lot of problem with digestion as well. So, as much as I love strawberries, I have to be very careful with them. I can't have too many. There are things like brown bread which I shouldn't eat. So because of the grains and the seeds and everything that goes into brown or even granary bread, it actually makes things a lot harder to digest for me. I also have to be quite careful with food that is high in fibre. So for example, baked beans. I love baked beans, but I used to have them probably every lunchtime, and I can't do that anymore because foods that are high in fibre speed up your digestive system, and if you have colitis, you definitely don't need help speeding it up. So there are some foods that I have to be really careful with. Now, I'm the kind of person who loves a bag of crisps, a bar of chocolate. I've never been the kind who's all about, I've got to eat salad, I've got to eat this, that and the other. Actually, I've been told to eat things which are probably higher in calories, just in case if anything does go wrong and I start to feel ill, I won't drop the weight. So it just goes against exactly what the media says. You know, you should eat healthier if you have IBD. That is so not the case. I've been told by a medical professional that I need to eat probably more calories than I do already. Now, on that same thread, as somebody who loves going out to eat in restaurants, I actually shouldn't really have very large meals. I have quite a lot of trouble when I have a big meal because I have extreme bloating. So while most of the time I have actually quite a flat stomach, I'm very blessed. But if I've had a big meal, the bloating, it genuinely looks like I am about 4 months pregnant. I'm going to take a picture of a before and after, so I'll put it up here. So while I love going out for large meals, and I'm probably not really very good at cutting back on doing that, yeah, it has quite an interesting effect on my body. For anybody out there who has just been diagnosed, I will offer a bit of advice. While I think it is good to look online about, you know, what is colitis, for example, I would be very careful, because when I was first diagnosed, I was a bit petrified, because I actually follow Crohn's and Colitis UK on Facebook, and they often post a lot of stories about these people out there, or these amazing stories about these people who are living with it and are getting on with it. And while I think it's great that that's shared, I think when you've first been diagnosed, it is quite scary, because you almost look at that and you think, is that what's to come? Am I really going to end up with a stoma bag? You know, am I going to be nearing death? And all of these things cross your mind. The best person that you can ask is your doctor. So if you have questions that scare you, like I did, write a big list. Next time you see him, sit there, get somebody to come with you and write notes, and you can just rattle off, in your case, is this applicable? And it was so helpful for me to do that. I know that when it first started for me, I didn't want to tell anyone, because I thought, I don't want to tell people that, you know, I found blood when I've gone for a number 2 as such. But I just think that this embarrassment and this taboo really needs to stop. If there is something wrong, you absolutely have to go and get it checked out. You know, the longer you wait, the worse it's going to get. I do think there is a taboo in this country, and probably worldwide, about this kind of thing. Talking to people about your toilet habits and realising that actually it's not normal. But I know that anyone out there who has IBD, or even those who have IBS, know that the minute you walk into a doctor's surgery, all of that goes out the window. That you are talking about things that are so personal, and it becomes just another norm to you. I know for one that I have had extreme support from my boyfriend. He is the one that I turn to when I have something a little bit unusual happen. And that is the best support I can ask for. I know that no boyfriend would ever want their girlfriend to turn around and start talking about how much blood was in their poo. But I'm very lucky for the support that I have, and hopefully if you know somebody with IBD, then you now have more information and you can be as supportive as he has been for me. I hope this has taught you something about IBD. Perhaps you didn't know anything about it and now you do. I really hope so, if that's the case. Hopefully somebody out there who has just been diagnosed has been watching this and they know what to expect, or they know that they're not alone. And I think that that is the one thing that I really want to get out of this. So Tuesday the 19th of May is IBD Awareness Day. Wear purple. This is the colour for Crohn's and Colitis UK, and it just helps to spread more awareness. Unfortunately, I don't really have many purple clothes, but I've tried to put on whatever I have that's purple for this video. If you want to find out any more, or if you want to somehow help, you can go to crohnsandcolitis.org.uk. They are the charity or organisation that are working towards research into Crohn's and colitis to potentially find a cure. So if you want to help in any way, then please go and read more on their website. Thank you so much for watching. If you've stuck all the way through, thank you, it means the world. I hope I've been a good spokesperson for people with IBD, and I am truly really sorry if I've missed anything important out. Please share this video, please like this video, do anything that you can to get the word out there. People need to be talking more about IBD, because as I said before, it affects such a huge number of people and everybody's embarrassed to talk about it. So this embarrassment needs to stop. Thank you for watching.